Okay, so I think we're ready to begin. Okay, so let us start then with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so now today is May 9th, and tomorrow will be Vesak. Well, actually the formal Vesak, the official Vesak was May 7th, already passed. But tomorrow we'll be celebrating Vesak at Zhuangyan Monastery, online at Zhuangyan Monastery. And today we actually had a white morning. We had a snowfall overnight, here already deeply into the month of May. And taking a walk this morning, we were able to get some photographs of a snow-covered Zhuangyan Monastery. Okay, so now we're continuing with our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fours. And now we come to Sutta number 33, very powerful sutta called the Lion. And so this is a sutta which revolves around a simile. It's one of the primary teaching devices that the Buddha uses is to draw upon similes in order to reinforce a point. And sometimes sort of a typical pattern in the Buddha's teaching is to begin with a formal statement of doctrine, then come to a simile, bring in a simile to illustrate that point of doctrine, and then come back and reinstate the point of doctrine. So that's a kind of A, B, A pattern. But this sutta uses a different pattern. It begins with the simile and then comes to the application. So this we could say is a B, A pattern. Simile followed by the application. And so here the simile is that of a lion. And this is one of the prominent symbols for the Buddha that we find throughout the Pali Canon, or throughout the Sutta Pitaka. For example, in the Majjhima Nikaya, there's a very important sutta called the Mahasihanada Sutta, the larger discourse on the lion's roar. And in that sutta, the Buddha proclaims his 10 special powers of knowledge and his 4 grounds of fearlessness, grounds of self-confidence. And so what are some of the qualities that we associate with the lion that makes the lion a symbol for the Buddha? I think, first of all, the lion, we could see here, is said to be the king of beasts. Mega Raja is the Pali expression. And so just as the lion is the king of the beasts, so the Buddha is the foremost amongst all sentient beings. And the lion is a king of beasts because it has strength, physical strength, and a loud roar, a roar that reverberates throughout the jungle. And so the Buddha is the one who is the foremost in strength. But in the Buddha's case, it's not physical strength, but it's the strength of his power of knowledge. It's called in Pali, Jnana Bala, the power of knowledge. And then just as the lion's roar reverberates throughout the entire jungle in all directions, so the Buddha proclaims the Dharma with a powerful voice that reverberates throughout the entire world system, not only to the people who are immediately listening to him, but it's said that the Buddha's proclamation of the Dhamma can even extend to other galaxies or other solar systems within this galaxy. And even today now, maybe we could say through the internet, the power of the Buddha's voice spreads to all the continents. So even the Buddha, when he was alive physically, was teaching just in a small region of northern India, northeast India. Now the Buddha, then over the centuries, the roar of the Buddha's Dhamma spread first over greater India, then from India to South and Southeast Asia, then spread further to East Asia, to Central Asia, and now it's spread throughout the whole world to Europe, the Americas, Australia, and so forth. Okay, so for these reasons, these are some of the reasons why the Buddha is compared to the lion. And the Buddha's proclamation of the Dhamma is compared to the lion's roar. In Pali, we have the expression sihanada, the lion's roar. Okay, so this sutta begins with the simile. And so the Buddha starts off by saying that in the evening, the lion, the king of beasts, comes out from his lair, from his den, stretches his body, and when he's stretching the body, it yawns and it shakes the body and it yawns. Then it surveys the four quarters, it looks to each of the directions, and then it roars its lion's roar 3 times, and then it sets out in search of game. And so the key sort of expression here is the lion's roar. And so now the text tells, oh, I got the message that you can't see what I've typed. Hmm. Do you see what I typed?
Yes.
Yes, Bhante.
Okay. Okay, so now the text continues that when the lion roars, sends out its lion's roar, then the other animals hear the lion's roar and they're filled with fear, a sense of urgency, and terror. Let's see the Pali terms that are used here. Yeah, so the Pali expressions are bhayang is what we translate as fear. Then sangvega is what I translate a sense of urgency. In this case, the lion's, that sense of urgency comes to manifestation in this, when the other animals hear the lion's roar, then they realize if they're going to preserve their lives, they have to get out of the way. They have to escape, going to try to find some prey, some food, and they don't want to become food for the lion. And then the other term is santasa, which it's what I translate as terror. It's a very strong feeling of fear. And so it happens to escape from the lion. So each of the animals will run towards its own proper dwelling place. So animals like, I don't know, prairie groundhogs, I'm just assuming, will dive into the ground, into the holes. Those who live in the water, like turtles and other animals that come out from the water, lizards and snakes maybe will jump into the water. Those who live in the woods will flee to the woods, and birds will fly up into the sky. And even the elephants, which are so much bigger than the lion, even the elephants, the bull elephants, which are kept within towns and cities, become full of fear. And so they burst and break their bonds, and, and they urinate and defecate, and they run here and there. And so powerful, the text says, among the animals, so powerful is the lion, the king of beasts, majestic and mighty. Okay, so this is the simile. And now comes the application of the simile. And the application is made to the Buddha, who is here called the Tathagata. So the Buddha, the Tathagata, is compared to the lion. And just as the lion comes out from its den out into the open, so the Tathagata arises in the world. And then the text describes the Buddha, the Tathagata, by the standard epithets for the Buddha. So he's called an arahat, one who has completely destroyed all of the bonds and fetters, one who's perfectly enlightened, one who possesses clear knowledge and excellent conduct, the Sugata, the fortunate one, Lokavidu, the knower of the world, the Anguttara Purisa Dhammasarati, unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed, Satta Deva Manusanam, the teacher of the deities and human beings, then Buddho, the enlightened one, and Bhagava, the blessed one. Okay, so that is the arising of the Buddha in the world, which is like the lion coming out from its den, stretching its body and shaking the body. And then the lion roars 3 times. And so in a similar way, the Buddha turns the wheel of Dharma. He teaches the Dhamma. And here the teaching of the Dhamma is expressed in this way. Such is, and the Pali uses a word, an expression that's very difficult to translate adequately into English. The Pali word is Sakkaya. I think we've come across this word before. So it's derived from Sat, which means existent, plus Kaya, which means body. And so if you translate this literally, it would give the meaning of the existent body. But what is meant by Sakkaya is not just the physical body, but it is the collection of the 5 aggregates. So these 5 aggregates are the aggregate of bodily form, then feeling, perception, the volitional activities, intentions, purposes, acts of will, and fifthly, consciousness. So these 5 aggregates function integrated with each other, functioning together in unison, constitute the existent body, the personal identity or personal existence of a living being. And when you see this fourfold structure that is laid out here about Sakkaya, about personal existence, what does this fourfold structure remind you of? Does it bring up anything that seems familiar from the Dhamma?
4 truths.
The 4 noble truths.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same pattern as the 4 noble truths. And if you remember the way the first noble truth is explained in the Buddha's first discourse, he says, like, what is the noble truth of suffering? Birth is suffering, old age is suffering, death is suffering, and so on. Then it ends with the statement, in short, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. So the 5 aggregates represent the truth of suffering. And here, the 5 aggregates are represented by that expression, Sakkaya, personal existence or individual identity. And so when the Buddha teaches the Dhamma, what he teaches is, these are the 5 aggregates, and then he'll explain the nature of the 5 aggregates. This is the origin of personal existence, that these 5 aggregates originate through craving. Such is the cessation of the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates cease with the ending of craving, and such is the way to the cessation of the 5 aggregates. That is the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is the Buddha, just as the lion gives off its lion's roar, so the Buddha turns the wheel of Dharma by teaching the nature of the 5 aggregates and how the 5 aggregates arise and cease. And now in the simile, when the animals hear the lion roaring, then they run in the different directions. And so in the sutta, what corresponds to the other animals are especially the devas in the higher deva worlds. And so the texts say that when those devas, who are long-lived, beautiful, abounding in happiness, dwelling for a long time in their palaces, when they hear the Buddha teaching the Dhamma, they respond just like the animals hearing the lion's roar. For the most part, they are filled with bhaya, with fear, samvega, a sense of urgency, and terror, santasa. Again, the text uses those same 3 expressions, bhayang, samvegang, santasang. And sometimes people think that the ideal in Buddhism is to be completely free from fear. And in a way that's true, but as the outcome of the practice, as the culmination of one's development. But in the initial stage, there is a kind of wholesome or healthy fear. Some people asked me actually earlier when I spoke about the 3 unwholesome roots, they asked me, why is fear, or where does fear fit into the unwholesome roots? And some people say, or some teachers say that fear corresponds or fits in with the unwholesome root of hatred or aversion, because just as through aversion one wants to get rid of this unpleasant object, so through fear one wants to run away from the unpleasant object. But I don't completely agree with this, because I think that whereas aversion or hatred is always considered unwholesome and undesirable, I think if we look at the suttas, that there are different kinds of fear. And some kinds of fear, we could say, are definitely unwholesome. This would be what I call obsessive and incapacitating fear or irrational fear. But there is a kind of wholesome fear, a kind of beneficial fear. And this is the fear that arises when one starts to see into the real nature of human existence and the illusions that instill in us a false sense of complacency start to fall away. And so usually we go through life thinking that everything is going to work out hunky-dory, everything is going to work out for the best. You know, we almost have this illusion of invulnerability, that we're invulnerable. Even we could say an illusion of immortality, not that we conceptually believe that we're going to live forever, but there is a kind of built-in defense mechanism in the mind that tells us that, you know, death always lies somewhere in the distant future, that for the rest of this year, next year, the next 5 years, 10 years, we're going to go on living and living with strong, healthy, capable bodies. I've spoken to people in their late 80s and asking, do you ever think that you're going to die, possibly die within the next year or two? And they say, no. Just the idea of death doesn't occur to us. And so what has to be done to gain this push to the Dhamma is to break through these illusions of invulnerability and invincibility, invulnerability, the illusion of immortality, by recognizing that we are definitely going to die, that we're constantly growing older, we are always approaching closer to the time of our death, and we have no control, no mastery over where we go when death strikes us. And so when we come to recognize the truth of our impermanence, the truth of our vulnerability, then there arises a kind of fear, a sense of urgency, even a santasa, which is translated here as terror, but it's related to a word that means trembling, that we start to tremble with the recognition that we have to do something to resolve the problem of our mortality, of our impermanence, of our vulnerability. We have to move from this insecure, unstable, undependable state of samsaric birth and death and reach a place of safety and security what the Buddha calls the Anguttara Yoga Kema, the unsurpassed security from bondage. And that is Nibbana, which the Buddha calls Akutobhayang, the state that is invulnerable to fear and danger. And so when we start to reflect deeply on the truth of our mortality, particularly instilled in us through the Maranasati, the meditation on death, then there arises this kind of healthy sense of fear, this sense of urgency. That sense of urgency is what drives us to give up our complacency, give up our laziness, give up our negligence and heedlessness, and take up the practice in earnest. So maybe we could say that the sense of urgency is what leads to uppamada. Uppamada means diligence or heedfulness. And so even if you're young and healthy, of course we wish, we all want to live and enjoy a long lifespan and enjoy good health. But we have to constantly remind ourselves that death is the inevitable end for all living beings, and we have no prediction. We can't predict with certainty how long we have to live. And so it's that sense of urgency that tells us we have to take up the practice now. We just can't put it off and think, I can bargain with the Lord of Death and tell him, okay, let me enjoy myself now, today. I could take up the practice tomorrow, next month, maybe next winter, I'll dedicate myself to the practice. Or now I'm a young man, let me wait till I reach middle age. Now I'm in middle age, let me wait till I reach old age. Now I'm in my 70s, let me wait till I reach the age of 80. But we have to start now. Okay, so this is the way we ourselves as human beings have to take this to heart, this teaching of impermanence of the Buddha. But here the sutta is expressed or formulated by way of the devas. The devas are the deities, the divine beings living in the various heavenly worlds. So in the Buddhist cosmology, we speak about different types of devas. There are devas who are dwelling close to the earth, devas who dwell in the sky, and then above the sky-dwelling devas, there are devas who live in the heavenly realms or celestial realms. And probably here, what's intended are the devas in the heavenly realms, because these are said to be long-lived devas. So the lifespan of the devas is much longer than the lifespan of human beings. And then the Abhidharma, let me see if I can find it quickly. Yeah, we have here, can you see this chart from the Abhidhamma, which gives the lifespan of the devas in the different deva worlds? So you could see the lifespan, human beings, the lifespan is indefinite. But when we come to the devas, we have the lowest level, their lifespan is 500 celestial years. And a celestial year is much longer than a human year. Then the Tavatingsa devas, 1,000. Yamadevas, 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 16,000 celestial years. Then we come to the Brahma world, a third of an aeon, a half an aeon, a full aeon, 2 aeons, 4, 8, 16, and so forth. Longer and longer, even 16,000 cosmic aeons, great aeons. And so the lifespan of the devas is so long that the devas, easy for them to fall into a state of heedlessness, negligence. So the devas have much longer lifespans than human beings, and the devas are always beautiful. Human beings, we have a few are beautiful, most people ordinary looking, some people are ugly and unpleasant looking, but the devas are all radiant and beautiful, and their lives are full of pleasure and happiness. Whatever enjoyable objects of the senses they want, they can gain at will, and they're said to live to have long lifespans dwelling in these palaces, these celestial mansions. And so what happens with the devas is that they easily fall into the delusion of eternalism, of immortality, believing that their life will go on forever. But then certain devas, those devas who have some kind of connection with the Buddha Dharma, probably from previous lives, they get the opportunity to hear the Buddha teaching the Dharma. And when they hear the Buddha teaching the Dharma, then the startling realization comes to them. So they think, though we thought ourselves to be permanent, now we see that we are really impermanent. Though we thought that we were everlasting, that our lives would last forever, now we realize that we're really transient. And we thought that we would live through all eternity, but now we see that we're not eternal, that we're bound to die. And so they think now you can see that we are impermanent, transient, non-eternal, and our lives consist not of a permanent, everlasting soul or spirit, but what we really consist of is just this compound of the 5 aggregates, Sakaya. And so when they come to this realization, then they become filled with fear, with the sense of urgency, the sense of terror. And what happens with many of the devas, when they become filled with fear, the sense of urgency, the sense of terror, it's not that they are paralyzed forever with fear, but they attend carefully to the Dharma, and they direct their minds to understanding the Dharma. And so many devas can attain the different stages of awakening, of enlightenment. So when the Buddha gave his first discourse, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, setting in motion the wheel of Dharma, if you read the discourse to the end, you see that the audience at the time consisted not only of the 5 ascetics, the 5 monks, but also listening to the discourse. There were the devas in the different deva worlds. And many of those devas who listened to the Buddha teach made the breakthrough to realization, attaining the stage of stream entry, once returning, non-returning, perhaps even arhatship. Sometimes I've heard people say, expressing their understanding, that it's only human beings who can reach the stages of realization. But that is not the case. Devas too can attain realization. The only ones who can't attain realization are the devas in the formless realm, the non-material realm. Because in order to achieve realization, to attain the first stage of breakthrough, one has to listen to the Dhamma. One has to be able to hear the Dhamma. And for that, one needs the ear faculty. So the formless deities who don't have any ears can't hear the Dhamma. But the devas in the other realms can listen to the Dhamma, can meditate on it, and can attain realization. Okay, so in this case, the roar of the Buddha, the Tathagata's lion's roar, reverberates through the Deva realm, and it awakens the Devas from their state of complacency and sets them moving towards the practice of the Dhamma. And so then the sutta says, so powerful is the Tathagata, so majestic and mighty in this world, including the Devas. And then we have, to illustrate this, some very beautiful verses. I actually like to take the verses in Pali alongside the English in the Pali. Okay, so Satyada Buddho Abhinyaya Dhamma Chakang Pavatai. So such of when the Buddha, through direct knowledge, or through the higher knowledge, then it says Dhamma Chakang Pavataye, sets in motion the wheel of Dharma. And then the Buddha is further qualified as Satta Apati Pugalo. He is the teacher, the one without a peer, without a rival, the peerless person. And in this world with its devas, he sets in motion the wheel of Dharma. And setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma, that was what the Buddha did in his first discourse. It's called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And here, the setting in motion, the wheel of Dhamma, is expressed. Again, it uses the structure of the Four Noble Truths, but rather than take the full exposition of the truth of dukkha, the truth of suffering, it just homes in on the essential meaning of the First Noble Truth, the essence of the First Noble Truth, which is the constellation of the 5 aggregates that constitutes personal existence, individual identity. So what the Buddha teaches is the truth of dukkha, which is equated with personal existence. Then to fit the meter, it changes the sequence. but we go to the origin of personal existence, then its cessation, and then the noble eightfold path that leads to the calming down of suffering. Here it uses the expression dukkha directly. Dukkupasama gamaning. Okay, then the next verse takes us to the devas. Then even those devas who have long lifespans, beautiful, blazing with glory, when they hear the Buddha teaching the Dhamma, then they become filled with fear and terror, just like the animals who hear the lion's roar. And then they say, it seems that we're impermanent, that we are not beyond Sakaya, not beyond personal existence. So that's what they think when they hear the word of the Arahat. The Arahat here is the Buddha. Sudva Arahato Vakyang Vipamutasa Tadino. When they hear the word of the Arahat, the stable one, again, that's the Buddha whose mind is perfectly stable, perfectly balanced, and who is Vipamutasa, who is fully free. Okay, so that is the exposition of the sutta on the lion's roar. And now I could see if we could have any questions. Let me see how to get. I see there's some chat. Maybe I open the chat box. Okay. Okay, this is Nina.